television, or academic or journalists. For example, we had Sam Jones from The Guardian last time. And actually, what I thought was would be interesting would be having the experience of somebody who is very different, had a very different trajectory to me. I was always at the bottom class in sport at school, but here we have somebody who's, a world class sportsman, very accomplished in that field, and has then come to live in Spain later in life, and without having that background in Hispanic studies. That's when we think about it. I mean, Richard was just pointing out to me in the introduction. I mean, his experience is atypical in the sense he's not living on the costas, which are full of, expats, but it's an experience of somebody who's viewing Spain from a different way in which we, those of us who are engaged in it professionally often do. So I think it's going to be equally fascinating to learn about his life before Spain, and then seeing how he's, how the experience of living there in some very less euphemistically say complicated years has been. And as Pedro said, what we will do is we will have a chat between me and Richard, which I imagine will be about kind of 45 minutes or thereabouts. There'll be a time for questions at the end, which you're free to ask in Spanish or English. I can always do the translation, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And we'll take it from there. And then this is our last Hispanglia it's the last in the series for this year, but I think we'll be back next year. But we'll have more details about that later on. Anyway, over to Rich. Just wanted to go back to the beginning, so to speak. I mean, you were born in Belfast and then moved to England. Although both, of course, are part of the UK, I imagine this was a culture shock in some regards. And I wondered if you could talk about how this kind of movement early, moving places, moving locations early on in your career, prepared the terrain for you to travel later in life and then eventually settle in Spain.
Good evening, Duncan. Good to talk to you. Good to be here. Yes, it all started, it seems a very long time ago now, back in Northern Ireland. We were there through the height, almost the height of the Troubles, early 70s. My father was a racehorse trainer, didn't have a big yard, probably only 14, 16 under 20 horses. But we were spending a lot of time crossing the border. I remember going racing with them a lot. Actually led a horse round when I think it was only six or seven down at Garran Park. Certainly wouldn't happen these days. But yeah, traveling around Ireland, across the border especially, got more and more difficult. And Dad, in the end, decided to relinquish his license. And my mother's parents were quite elderly, living in England. She wanted to move back to be closer to them as well. And so we took the move across the water to Gloucestershire, where Dad was offered the chance to manage a stud farm there near Tetbury.
So, and how did it? What are your memories of that change? That kind of moving there. Was it positive? Was it a shock to the system?
Yes, yeah. I think we were heading all over Ireland with the horses anyway. I was able to take my pony, which was sort of a big thing for me at the time. The school was a bit of a change. I used to go to a place in Ireland called Dunover, which was probably I think about probably about 8 years were fitted into two very small classrooms. Two teachers, Mrs. McAveen and Miss Little, and moving into a slightly bigger junior school at Tetbury took a little bit of getting used to once I was there. We moved, I believe, from what I remember, April to Easter holidays. So I had the one term, and it didn't take. To be fair, I don't think it took too long. I was mad into sport and ended up playing cricket, football at the school there. So yeah, it wasn't too much of a hardship to actually move across the water.
No, thank you. And then, of course, you went on to have, a remarkable career in horse racing. And the title of your first, I say first autobiography because you've written two, is Obsessed. I mean, you're very open in that about the kind of ruthlessness and single-mindedness that led you to be one of the most successful jockeys of your generation. I wondered what you found. Did you find writing it difficult, therapeutic? What was the experience like?
I have to hold my hands up that I didn't actually write it. So David Walsh, definitely, I think I didn't choose too badly. Anyway, David's Sunday Times reporter, great journalist, fantastic journalist, better known for all the work he did on Lance Armstrong, exposed or led to his exposure basically in 2010. But not before. I think Lance Armstrong had already sued the Times for various pieces that David had already written. But anyway, getting back to it, David did a great job. I suppose in writing that, I wanted it to be a true story, not looking back at a career, but not through rose-tinted glasses, sort of warts and all. And the life of certainly a jockey, or the way it was for me, it was tough. It was hard. I had to be driven to. I wanted to be, having ridden for 3-4 seasons, riding 70, 80 winners a year. My main ambition then was to be champion jockey, to challenge someone called Peter Scudamore, who had been champion probably 8 or 9 times by then. To challenge Scu for his crown, and it took a lot of doing, but I eventually got there in the 92-93 season, and having got there, I hope to stay at the top. I moved stables to Martin Pipes, and difficult move, but I felt that leaving David Nicholson's, my first main yard, he'd been very loyal to me, very good to me. So it was a difficult move. And then having moved to Martin Pipes, the horses started running very badly and didn't go as until about halfway through the season, things changed, and actually did go on to win the championship on a very close run thing with Adrian Maguire. And won it again in 94. But they were tough times. They were, I had to it was racing 100% of the day. And I was never away from it, basically. It was the one thing on my mind at all times. And it took its toll. It took its toll on my marriage, my ex-wife, Carol. And other things. So we included in the book, and fortunately things changed 95, 96. I went freelance as a jockey, rode more in Ireland, rode abroad a little bit more as well, places like America, France, and the best years of my career, from probably 95 till I retired in 99.
Yeah, this is one of these things that's interesting about it doesn't sound like from the way you put it, it sounds like you've got fondness for it, but there isn't kind of nostalgia necessarily for that period in your life.
No, you look back, it feels like a different time now.
Yeah.
It's that far away. I don't know, maybe not being in racing now. It's it's very, very, very different life. But I was racing was very, very good to me. So what came after racing was basically down to what I'd done, what had happened in racing, and my success in racing led to what's happened in this life. So I feel very fortunate for that.
Thank you. And we'll come to discuss your time living in Spain later. But for now, I was wondering whether you have observed, and you said you went to race in America and France and other places. Have you noticed, have you observed similar or different obsessive tendencies amongst elite athletes or those involved in physically demanding activities? You, for example, I know you've photographed a lot of bullfighters. It's in different countries. Do you think there's different kind of traditions, different customs, depending on the place you are, or is kind of elite athletes, are you kind of a universal breed?
I think elite athletes. I think if we talk about obsession, whether it's Ronaldo with football, Beckham as well. They said they were, first onto the training field, last off it. Johnny Wilkinson, another prime example, I would say. And I think a lot of people. I know some champion jockeys that maybe it didn't. They could a little bit and still be champion, but the majority, I think, really have to, give it their all, have to be obsessed to actually reach the pinnacle.
Reach that peak condition. And I mean, linked to that, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I'm imagining that your time in the saddle didn't allow you much opportunity to travel for leisure during your professional career. And I wonder if that built up a desire to kind of go abroad, to travel more abroad for different reasons.
I've counted up, actually. It's probably rode in around 15 different countries around the world. Lucky to ride in the States. Jump racing, for those people that don't know, look at flat racing. It's in a lot of countries all around the world, but jump racing is a bit more select. And besides Ireland, France, and the UK, there's the standard of jump racing isn't that high in other countries around the world. They have it in the States, but not as much. There are one or two quite rich prizes over there. I went to ride quite a lot in the 90s around New York, but basically I was taken from the airport in Long Island about 15 minutes to Belmont Park, and that was it for the first probably 4 or 5 times I went to across to New York. I never even had the chance to visit Manhattan. So yes, in a way, great to travel. One of my first trips was on a jockey's trip to Australia and New Zealand, and but again, didn't get to see too much of the countryside. And when I retired, it was one of the first things I did. 2001, organized a trip around the world, and did have a little bit more time to see Australia among some places.
Just out of curiosity, when you said that the horse jumping wasn't as, the standard wasn't so high internationally, why is that? Is that just a lack of tradition, kind of, was less people involved in it, training?
Yeah, so a lot of it also depends. Jump racing, in Ireland, it's great because it rains a lot. It's something you can't. The ground has to be reasonable for the horses. The breeding also has a lot to do with that. The horses are bred. It's a lot, bigger money as far as flat racing is concerned, compared with the jump racing. So yeah, it's a much more international sport, flat racing, as opposed to jump racing.
No, thank you for that. And I mean, elite sportsmen retire much younger than most of us do, and many struggle to adapt to, inverted commas, civilian life. I've, for example, been interested in observing the reasons why so many retired matadors struggle with alcoholism and depression. I think we see that maybe in the UK with a lot of ex-boxers. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but your tactic seems to have been to keep on working and stretching yourself, but in different and pushing yourself in very different environments. And I wondered whether it was a conscious decision to kind of take a step back from the world of racing. I mean, you said how, that was what gave you the platform to then move on to do different things. And, I wondered, you did a phenomenal range of different things. I mean, how, for example, did you end up you ended up doing Strictly Come Dancing, didn't you?
Yes, all sorts of things followed. Basically, from while I was riding, I set up a business, sports marketing business in Wimbledon, outskirts of London. I was living in Fulham at the time, so I was out to the office. And when I started in 1999, but before I'd retired, I had an injury, had a neck injury at the time. I was riding with it, was living with it, but I knew my time was nearly up, and eventually got me in August '99. So I literally I went to America to get more advice about the neck injury, and I was told there by a guy called Paul Check to retire. That was it. My neck couldn't stand any more falls, and so I literally flew back to England straight into an office at home. But I didn't choose my business partners very well. And looking back, if I probably done one thing, it would have been better to have gone done a business course or whatever. And through not choosing my partners that well, business partners that well, the business went wrong within about a year and a half. By the end of 2000, so it started in '99 January. By the end of 2000, it was nearly on the rocks, and that was when I then decided to, okay, say goodbye to that. That venture didn't work, and I organized a trip around the world to follow it. Yeah. The other thing, as you say about sportsmen, and you can see, how hard it's just this week actually. Ben Cohen, I don't know if you read it, Duncan, in the Telegraph, but
No, I didn't.
he said a rugby player again reached the pinnacle of sport, playing for England, win a Rugby World Cup medal in the famous 2003 match. And he said he sort of always looks back at it and said he wished he'd gone into university and had a stable career, because since his retirement, it's been very difficult for him, I believe. And you look at others, Bradley Wiggins at the moment, apparently severe financial trouble as well. It's not easy. And to be fair, there were times I didn't find it very, very, very easy either. I struggled to go racing. I struggled to watch races. I didn't enjoy it. It made me unhappy. And from that side of it, I thought, well, that's what sort of basically I made the decision not to become a pundit. I'd been offered to do that side for the BBC, but I said no initially to that as well. And to try and look at other things, and whether it was motivational speaking. I was very fortunate. In 2001, I started leading tours for a company, originally Ultimate Travel. They were taking racing tours to the Czech Republic. Started on a few tours on that, and then through that, I then went to the Adventure Travel Show. Met a great guy called Johnny Bilby, who had just started his own company called Wild Frontiers, and just chatting away to Johnny, eventually got to lead some riding holidays to various places in Central Asia, and 20 odd years later, I'm still doing the same.
Still doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a particularly tough moment, that idea of being told that you've got this neck injury, which means you shouldn't ride again, and then a business venture going. I mean, that sounds like, that must have been.
It was difficult at the time, but as I say, probably looking back, it did me a big favor in the end. As I say, probably couldn't see that in 2001. But that's how things I've been fortunate. Things have turned out. I then, through that sort of, again, chance meeting, maybe the racing thing again helped, meeting David Hempelman Adams, the first polar explorer. He's apparently the first guy to hold the Explorers Grand Slam. David had climbed the 7 highest summits in 7 continents, and been to the North Pole and the South Pole, and achieved that in the 90s. And I said, "Oh, I hear you like travel." So he convinced me that a small expedition across Baffin Island, or a part of Baffin Island, would be a good idea. Pulling a sled, temperatures down to about -15, -20. So I went off, did that, and within about 2 weeks of coming back, he said, "I've got something else for you: the North Pole, magnetic North Pole polar race." And within, as I say, probably 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, I'd signed up and was heading off on that. So, yeah, just these chance meetings and opportunities. It's yeah.
Well, we say chance meetings. I don't think anybody who met me, well, I don't think anybody who met me would try and convince me to lead an expedition to the North or South Pole. I don't think anyone would manage to convince me it would be a good idea. I mean, could you tell us a bit about what were those? I mean, the two extremes. I mean, what memories do you have of those expeditions, and what memories do you say you have of appearing on the television and Strictly? I mean, they sound just such
Yeah,
diverse.
very, very diverse. Yeah, that's I have to say Baffin Island, amazing. Ended up in an Inuit village and flying back to Iqaluit, meeting some of the polar explorers there. So the North Pole race, magnetic North Pole race, ended up. I had two teammates and a guy called Tony Martin, who was ex-commando. He had two teammates. They all dropped out. We ended up together, myself and Tony, taking on a team of basically Marines. Phil McLeod, Chris McLeod, Phil Ashby, and a guy called Manley Hopkinson, a Hong Kong policeman. There were a team of 4 teams, and it was racing like 300. I think it was about 300 miles to an old plotted site of the magnetic North Pole from Resolute in northern Canada. And pretty, as I say at the time, the toughest thing I did until the South Pole expedition came along. The difficulties we had on the North Pole is I dislocated my shoulder a couple of times on the way. That was another horse-related injury. I had a loose shoulder, and poor old Tony actually had to try and force my shoulder in on both occasions. First time it went in very, very easily. Second time we couldn't manage. So temperatures of -20. I'm prostrate on the ice, and Tony's trying to bang my shoulder into place. But it all added to the adventure.
So you're not selling it. You're not selling it to me here.
Besides also bumping into a polar bear as well. But yeah, and I suppose off the back of that, we survived one way or another. We came second in that race to the guys, Manley and the team, and off the back of that, then it was an idea to, having been to a magnetic pole, to do 90 degrees either north or south. North was becoming more and more difficult as there is, the ice disappears now quite rapidly. So it's almost impossible to do a full expedition to the North Pole unless you're going through 24 hours darkness. And so South Pole, again, like the magnetic North Pole race, was to do it for various charities as well and try and raise money. And it took 3 to 4 years after the magnetic pole race to get that one off the ground.
Wow, that sounds quite an adventure. And then you mentioned the motivational speaking in passing. You also developed an interest in photography. I was wondering, you kind of now and I'm advised to recommend anyone who to go and have a look at some of Richard's photos afterwards. But how did that come about? That interest in photograph, and how did you become? How did you
I was
go
always
from doing it as
interested.
a kind of hobby to reaching professional level?
Was always interested at school in the darkroom at a place called Rentham College near Cirencester, Gloucestershire. So I'd always had that interest. And then through racing, I had a lot of good friends. Mel Fordham, Ed Byrne was one of the best racing photographers you'd get. So Lawrence Squire, I ended up in business with him later on, 2004, 2005. He was a racing photographer. So a lot of friends. My ex-wife was a professional racing photographer as well. And basically going traveling, coming back with terrible, terrible photos. I thought I'd better do something about this. And also, I think the further you move away from career, your speaking opportunities become less. Motivational speaking opportunities were becoming less. So 2009, 2010, I was looking for something else to do, and I noted on Facebook, a friend on Facebook, a girl called Catherine O'Hara, who had been a show jumper, and she just put a post on Facebook saying, "No, I'm now at Spios." She'd taken photos of Johnny Murta, an Irish jockey, at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And I thought that looks really interesting. And basically, within about probably a month, I'd flown to Paris. I had an interview with Pierre-Yves, the head of the Speos International School, and had signed up for a year's course, photojournalism course. And in a way to, if I'm going to do something, maybe get paid for it, but also to combine travel and photography. That was the main reason.
No, thank you. Because actually, anecdotally, the first contact you and I had before we met in person was actually you very generously providing some photographic imagery for an article I did. And I also wonder, I mean, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about the idea of how aware, when you were a jockey, were you of the kind of photographs that were being done of you? Was that something that was on your radar of kind of who's taking the photographs? Where are they appearing? Do I come out well in these, or was that just secondary to winning?
It was always an interest, yeah. Always, decent photo, whatever. The photographers, then obviously you couldn't. None of them. There was no such thing, websites and everything else. So they'd give you proofs, just small little proofs in the 80s, 90s, and they'd send them to you every week. You'd get some, and yeah, you'd like a decent, certainly of your big winners, you'd like a decent photo of it. So you were hoping they caught you in sort of, you were sitting correctly on the horse and all of that, looking your best. But there were certainly a lot of times when you went, and also there were some amazing pictures of me falling as well. Something we did quite regularly as steeplechase jockeys, and that's part of the job. But some of those images were pretty incredible as well. So a photographer like Ed Byrne, just absolutely amazing. Through those 70s, 80s, 90s, he was top of the tree.
So what makes it good? What makes it good
nowadays is his equivalent.
So what makes a good, what makes a good photographer of horse racing?
Knowing the horses, I think, and he could ride and understood them. Experience. It's one thing having photographed the Mongol Derby, where I was photographing horses in a race. The Mongol Derby was a 1,000-kilometer race, and the Gaucho Derby is the race through the Andes. It's only 500 kilometers. It's probably the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It's non-stop from the moment you get up in the morning. You're photographing, or you're editing, you're captioning, you're sending by satellite phone or whatever. I have to say, it was not until I actually started that to realize how hard professional photographers work, and I really take my hats off.
That's a big claim for a man who's met a polar bear with a dislocated shoulder. It's the hardest you've worked. And are you competitive with the photography in the same way you were as a jockey, or is it different?
I never feel my never feel my photographs are good enough. They can always be better. There's always, I think, maybe one or two are okay. I'd like to think I'm my own harshest critic as far as that's concerned. You're still striving for that great photo. I'm very lucky to be. I've been made a judge on a thing called Travel Photographer of the Year, Tapoti, and you see some absolutely amazing photographs on the judging. We start with about 4,000 photographs, and we whittle them down to probably about 10 to 12 winners. And it's some amazing imagery that you just aspire to. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've got a long way to go still.
Yeah. Sounds a great job. I've been on the judging panel of that. And
It's wonderful. We're just actually in the next couple of days, we're this year's finals.
Brilliant. And now moving towards the kind of the Spanish side of your life, your biography. I mean, we've talked a lot about your different, you've traveled extensively. But then before you decide, you experienced a lot of different countries and cultures before deciding to settle in Spain just before the pandemic, if I'm correct. I mean, why Spain and why the area around? I mean, I know you started off in the city of Madrid and now you're in a kind of small town outside it. Why those destinations and what was it that appealed to you?
Well, it all started really 2012, 2013 after Speos. And Olivia and I, we decided to, she had friends. Basically, they were near Jimena de la Frontera, San Pablo, the village up the road. And we had a holiday in San Pablo, and I came back. We ended up going back about 2 months later. We enjoyed it so much, and ended up renting. So back and forward. Olivia was still working in England. I was traveling a lot, but when we could spend time, we get over to Spain. We then having rented in San Pablo, the bottom of the hill. We moved further up towards Ronda, to Gaucin, and rented a house there for 2 years.
So sorry, so what was it, just to interrupt you before you carry on, but what was, when you say, you went there first of all and you kind of loved it, were back 2 months later, what was it that attracted you so much?
The food, the lifestyle, the weather. There were quite a lot of things. Yeah. I suppose before, and my first few times in Spain were Puerto Banús, lads' holiday, as you can imagine, jockeys, go, heading around the bars in Puerto Banús. But this was a very, very different life, and I loved it. I loved the quaint villages up around those Pueblos Blancos, up around Ronda. They're just great places to visit. Yes, I enjoy the whole corridors as well. Another thing, the sport. We had the Welter pass us one day as well down in San Pablo, Jimena. So yeah, there was a lot to like.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry, I interrupted you. So then you were in Ronda for about 2012 to 2014, you were saying.
2012, 2014. And then Millie came along. So we actually moved back to England. It's near where my sister lives. Gail and her family are Pangbourne. So we moved to a place called Tidmarsh, just down the road. Millie was born, and I also was then planning for a walk in Japan, 2017. Millie was born in late 2015. Another charity walk through the 3 main islands of Japan. Came back off after that, and said to Olivia, I'm not really enjoying the dull winter days in Tidmarsh. Don't you think we should think about going back to Spain? And we gave it a lot of thought. I think I first traveled over to Madrid 2016.
Yeah.
And thought then it might make a good base. It gave Olivia a chance to work telecommunications. For me, it was brilliant because it's a great hub, flying both to America and flying to Central Asia, where a lot of the holidays were that I was leading for Wild Frontiers. And then Millie, the chance of Millie becoming bilingual. So that, yeah, in the end, it sealed it for us. We were back over 2018 to look at various places. May, and we actually moved over sort of late summer that year.
Which of course wasn't that long before the pandemic.
And
Yeah,
it wasn't, no. Back and forth, 2019, and then I set out early 2020 to Argentina to cover the Gaucho Derby, and I always remember saying to Olivia, I might struggle to get back off this one, and as it turned out, I returned to basically a ghost city. I got out at Avenida de Americas from the airport, and there was not a soul on the street. And walked all the way back down to Diego de Leon, where our flat was, in Alcantara. And yeah, what an experience!
Yeah, must have been, because the lockdown, the initial lockdown in Spain was a lot stricter than it was in the UK, and
It
I guess it
was
was
a
like walking
lot
through. I
stricter.
guess it was like walking through a fire
First,
film.
yeah. For the first 2 months, it was Millie didn't leave the flats for 2 months until early May, I think, from March the 10th, by March the 10th. But then we had it easier than the UK, probably from that point
Yeah.
onwards. We could at least go around our barrio, and yeah, it wasn't too bad for us from then on.
I mean, beyond the kind of, as obviously, the pandemic had challenges for everybody, but I mean, beyond that, what were the principal challenges and pleasures of building your new life in Spain? Because I mean, you seem happy there, but I guess it hasn't all been smooth. There's always difficulty
Yeah.
or obstacles in adjusting to a different culture.
Yes, I have to say, probably the bureaucracy would be top of that list. Maybe I just trying to get our NIEs, for example, our visits to Padre Pique,
Yeah.
the Policía Nacional Oficina, and I think are too stubborn to get someone to help us with it. I thought I can do it. I'm going, just use it like a challenge. And I always say, well, in the end, just you will have to take 2 or 3 attempts to get it done. First attempt, go take some paperwork, and try and find out what you really need for the second time. And that basically worked for all three, 2 NIEs. Millie and myself, we have Irish passports. Olivia has a TIE, having a UK passport. But I have to say that's been one of the major challenges. Buying a car can be a challenge as well. We're in the midst of that process at the moment. Yeah, but hey, there's a lot of other things that the food, the travel. I just love traveling around Spain. The cities to visit. We have Segovia over the mountain. We have Toledo up the road. Galicia. We went on holiday this year to Asturias, Llanes, just outside Llanes. You couldn't get a better holiday, and the roads. Yes, the queues into Madrid at rush hour are not great from Colmenar Viejo. But generally, we're lucky we don't have to commute. Olivia works from home. She doesn't have to commute into the city, so that saves an awful lot.
Just a brilliant base. And yeah, I mean, I was just thinking when you're talking about the bureaucracy, one of my big regrets of life is that I had a bank account the year that I did the year abroad in Spain. And then I made a mistake of giving that bank account up. And getting a bank account in Spain that was the hardest challenge. I started getting paid in Spain. I was just like, I mean, I eventually got one back again, but it was just what one would.
It can be difficult. Yes.
It
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah, I have to say I've been very lucky with mine, and they've helped me out a few times. But recently, I've online banking, changed my phone, and then having to change the app from one phone to the other app. That has been a bit of a process, but I have to say, if I'm allowed to mention, Deutsche Bank have been very, very good.
Well, it sounds like we're not being sponsored by Deutsche Bank, but also them because they let you take money out without charging you a commission when you take the euros out, and they're saying a lot less than the other ones do.
It was pretty good support from them anyway. I have to vouch for that.
We're honestly not being sponsored by them. I mean, I was also wondering about whether do you ever get recognised in Spain, and is the I'm presuming less so than in the UK, and if I'm not mistaken, is that an attraction for you, or does that not bother you if you were
Um,
spot?
it doesn't really mean anything to me now. To be fair, I don't get recognized too much in the UK now anyway. So, but I was just thinking about this. Most, I'm Thomas. My first name is Thomas Richard. So most of the time I just go, if I'm introducing to myself to some people, I just say, rather than complicate things, I'll just say Thomas. Um, but no, it doesn't have sometimes I was saying, where was it? Millie was sort of, we went to Ireland, for example, and Millie was sort of, oh, now we're going to Ireland, people might recognize you. I think it went all the way through the holiday, and I think one person the whole trip. So it's certainly it's not a big thing at all. Yeah. So
And was it when you at the height of when you were racing and things like that, or
um, yeah, in racing, certainly around the racing time, if you went to, for example, Naas outside Dublin in Ireland, you'd walk down the street and you'd be noticed. But London, there were times I had, for example, I don't know whether this was after I think it was while I was still riding, and taxi driver said, "You're that Richard Dunwoody, aren't you? I think you should get out of this taxi now. You owe me an awful lot of money. I've lost so much money betting horses that you've been riding." So that was, yeah,
he
yeah.
probably wasn't going to thank you for the money. He'd probably won some as well. So, but was it had he lost because he'd bet on the other jockeys, or because he'd bet on you? It could be.
I think he
Could be.
just, yeah, I think he'd chosen the wrong things that I'd been riding. So, yeah.
And I mean, I was also curious. I haven't actually been, but it's on my list of things to do. There is a horse racing track in Madrid, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
And I wondered. It always strikes me, and what I'm told is it attracts a much more sedate audience than racetracks in the UK. Although I guess the audiences in the UK were probably less drunken and raucous when you in your day. I mean, I wondered whether have you explored the history of horse racing in Spain, and do you ever go and watch it?
We've go a couple of times. We've been a couple of times. Basically, it's just to meet friends. So that's about the only time we go. I don't particularly go for the race. I actually find this really good museum at the track. A lot of pictures. The design of the stand actually was built. If you have you been to Zarzuela, Duncan? Have you been?
No, no, I don't. It's
But the design of the stand is quite special, and it's supposed to be modernist. I have to, yeah. So, and a lot of history there. Built in 35, 36, was then destroyed in the Civil War. Had to be rebuilt. But yeah, it's worth going. Worth going to the museum there if you don't like horses particularly.
No, I will do. And I mean, that's it. It's on my plan. I'm going to be in Madrid for all of April, I think, and that's on my list of things to do. It's always because it's just never because it's a Sunday, I think, if I'm correct, and it's just I've never got a free Sunday when it's.
Yeah, mainly Sundays, but then they have the race meetings during the summer, which well after my bedtime. They start at about 10:30, I think. They'll still be racing at 1 o'clock, and these I think they race in June, July.
Oh, I might have a look at that. I mean,
So
there's also
midweek meetings. Yeah,
and
yeah,
what you just said about the architectures is the Civil War is fascinating because the whole history I've always think the Olympic Stadium, which was built in Barcelona but then wasn't used in '92 because the Civil War got in the way. So there's a whole kind of
yeah.
history or a whole story to be told. I'm sure somebody has done about kind of these thwarted plans. I mean,
The other thing, just before we get off the subject, that we used to have a jockey used to ride in our Grand National every year called the Duke of Albuquerque,
yeah,
which I believe his seat is a place called Cuellar,
yeah,
which I actually went and did a bull run, the only bull run I've ever done in my life. But the Duke of Albuquerque was renowned in England for riding in the National, but also for falling in the National. He had so many injuries in the race that they reserved a bed for him every time at the local hospital in Liverpool. So
I didn't know that. So I mean, did you ever think about giving up? I mean, was it because it?
to be fair, the Duke rode until I'd say nearly in his 50s, when he used to ride a horse called Nerio. Good old horse, but 9 times out of 10, I think he ended up on the deck in the
I mean, it
National.
must have been for psychologically knowing that was a hospital bed reserved for you. I mean,
Yeah,
be a
very
strange
well.
thing. I mean, now to go off the racing, I mean, you've already mentioned Millie, your young daughter, and how the attraction of, her being raised bilingual. I mean, it must be a strange experience for you watching her learn Spanish, and kind of conversing in that. And actually, one of our last sessions we did earlier in the summer was about about the differences between the Spanish and British education systems. And I wonder, it's early days, but have you noticed anything different or anything that struck you about how she's been raised, the kind of environment she's been raised in, her language skills, and how she's been taught?
Yeah, we're very pleased with her school. She goes to school just down the road, Concertado, um, at Los Abetos, and yeah, it's. I'd love to have heard what you would say about the English and the Spanish systems.
We're
Some
writing it. It will be coming out. We're doing it. We're writing it. I'll send you the link because we're going to write it up for a thing for the magazine of the sort of British Spanish Society, which comes out of the embassy. So I'll send you that when
would
it
be very, very
comes out.
interesting for us because we're thinking, Millie will be 11 in a couple of years. And so her next school, whether she stays at Los Abetos, whether she goes to there's a school in Tres Cantos, Kings, where their curriculum is the UK curriculum.
It was the guy who set up the King. One of the Sir Roger Fry we had on was one of the people who set up the King the foundation of.
Yeah.
So
So
lots of elite
yes,
sports people have been there.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it would be very, very interesting. The one thing, the great thing we're finding about Millie's school, one of the great things we also find, and she's got great classmates, loves it, um, is basically that she's already aged from about the age of 6, 7. She's been doing presentations to the class, and that is
yeah.
certainly something I never did at my school. I wish I had done those sort of things at both Renkham and my junior school, and just preparing you for. And she stands up, she speaks well. It's not something I struggle to do it. Certainly it's something that would have stood me in very good stead later on in life. And we find that a bonus certainly
And that's very interesting because historically, one of the criticisms of the Spanish system in comparison to the English UK system has been that, I mean, it's generalizing hugely here, but there's lots of emphasis. The knowledge base is very good in Spain, but often students struggle with the confidence to then give presentations and speak. I mean, that's often been a criticism that's been given, and that's been a disadvantage in global competitiveness in terms of interviews and things like that. But maybe that's changed. I mean,
yeah. Well,
either you,
I hope it's something that they continue all the way through
yeah, yeah.
at Los Abetos. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I mean, just to kind of finish up with a couple of questions, what if anything do you miss about life in the UK? Is there anything you miss? I mean, you go back fairly regularly, but
Yeah, this year, so we're going back for Christmas. We've got five days. Obviously, family. My mother's elderly, and she's been over once. Yeah, actually, took her down to Las Ventas for her first in age 90. So
that's
um,
good. Never too late, never too yet, never
never,
too
never,
old to
never
go.
too late.
What did you
Uh,
take? What did you make of it? What did you make of a bullfight
um,
at 90?
She enjoyed the evening. Yeah, she did. Yeah, and that was her first time at a bullfight. Um, so unfortunately, Mum probably, she may come again one day, but and it's doubtful. So getting back to see her, and my sister, obviously Millie's cousins, Livia's sister. So that side of it, but not a lot else, I have to say. Weather is not that, the UK weather is not that appealing at the
Well, you can
moment.
probably just about, well, you can't see anything. You can just see the darkness outside my window of my
Yeah.
office in Leeds, but it's not.
The other thing I think we were talking about the roads here, and we went up towards the Pyrenees last March, and the roads were nearly empty on that Madrid Barcelona road. Zaragoza again. We were there in April. Again, just it's a different world, isn't it? And the queuing into London, I'd imagine it's the same in the north around Manchester and Leeds. It's a different ball game, isn't it?
No, I have colleagues. I mean, I don't drive, but I have colleagues who organising supervisions and things. They organise it. I never quite work out what they always don't want to finish after 3:30 or before because they've just got this. They just if they go kind of 10 minutes over, then they just know that's added an hour to them getting
Yeah.
to wherever they are.
The other thing we're very lucky with here, which I haven't mentioned. Yeah, I love running. Being outside, whether it's running or hiking. We're very lucky with a national park behind us, Sierra de Guadarrama. We've got
Yeah.
the Dritha here as well. So, but there are runs in and around Madrid every weekend. Whether it's 10K, 5K, a trail of 20K. You take your pick, and it's again half of them for very little money. You can join in these activities with a bike as well. I believe triathlons. So yeah, great for sport.
And I think when we met up last February, I seem to remember feeling very unfit the next day because I think I'd just emerged from bed and by the day after we'd met. And I think by the time I'd emerged from bed, you had just not only emerged because I had to get to a lunch. I think you'd already run a half marathon by that point, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there's plenty of them.
So I mean, in terms of, and just as a final question, in terms of your photography and other projects, what's next?
I have a few trips for Wild Frontiers lined up next year. I'm really looking forward to one in April to China, which has a great itinerary. Starts in Xi'an and then heads through Tibet and ends in Kashgar. So yeah, looking forward to that. We've got one ATC. It's called Across the Caucasus. Photography wise, a little bit quiet, but mostly nowadays it's for friends. And yeah, I'm open to offers as far as that's concerned. I'll take, if I'm visiting a corridor or whatever, then I'll take the camera along. Obviously, Andrew Moore is the great photographer over here, so yeah, it's nice to have a bench sort of level to compare your images to, and Andrew definitely sets the standard over here, and he supplies websites and various publications with his images. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to a few corridors through next year.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for that. I mean, I think we'll now open it up for if anyone has any questions. And as Pedro said, I think it's better I understand for the recording, for the questions to be put in the chat, but I can then read them out. And as I say, feel free to ask the questions in English, Spanish. You can even ask them in Catalan if you like, and I can do my, I don't think we've got anyone. Oh yes, we have actually got somebody here who's Catalan today, but sometimes we've had more. Adelante. Anyone want to start?
I have a question. I paid able to speak in the phone. Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting dialogue. Richard, considering that, I mean, you have been working as professional with great success in the United Kingdom, right? Now that you live in Spain, what is your opinion about the sport in Spain?
I love sports. Sport in Spain is amazing with the MotoGP. They've got great representation. I've only managed to get to one in Spain, which is Jerez. The football, Real Madrid supporter, Arsenal back in the UK. It was a lot easier, unfortunately. Now we're out living out of the town. I haven't been actually into the Bernabeu since we left the center of Madrid, but I used to really enjoy going to watch Real. During the sort of after COVID, and the only sport I really miss it, and I would say racing. Yeah, okay, that was another lifetime away. Rugby. We've been a couple of times. We've seen Spain play. I think it was Samoa. in one of the college grounds, isn't it? That they have the place. So we've been twice there with friends. And I say, if I miss one sport, it is rugby in Spain.
Yeah, because I mean there are some rugby teams in Spain, but it's not so popular as it is in England or in Ireland. It's obvious, yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's right. So it's such a big sport in Ireland, you know. So and yeah, I miss that side of it. Saying that, my team in England have now disappeared as well. They were London Irish, so it's not such a bad thing now. So
They had I'm speaking from a place of ignorance here, but it's bigger at rugby in Argentina than it is in Spain, isn't it? So.
Yes, certainly, yeah. You know, the Argentinian rugby team certainly always top 10, whereas ranked in the world now, I think Spain around 15, 16.
Interesting. Well, I was surprised one of our Erasmus students was telling me the other day his job as an active rugby scene in, amateur level, but in Galicia, which I'd never done.
Galicia, yeah. We've got a great friend, Jose, here. His son actually was at the Lyceum in Madrid.
Yeah.
And went to school, Stephen, went to school there, but had dual nationality, France and Spain. He won a gold medal at the Olympics this year for the rugby sevens, and he's one of the best Stephen Parath. So yeah.
Right.
Another question. I mean, you have been hiking and walking, yeah, in the poles in Japan, in so many places, long walks, hundreds of miles or thousands. Have you ever done the Camino de Santiago?
No, I've not done the Camino. I just find it might be a little bit busy, but
That's out of the season. In summer, of course, is very busy, but
very busy. Yeah, the thing would be to do. A friend of mine did from Porto, I think, up this year, and he loved it. It was fantastic. It is something I would consider also. I sort of wonder whether one day to do from a different. There's Camino even from Seville. You can take a route.
Yes, it's the Camino de la Plata through Extremadura to the north. Yes.
Yeah, there's the Madrid route as well from here. It goes actually through Navacerrada, I think, just up the road. So yes, it's certainly one thing to think about, but whether there would be another. Is the Numancia or the old route where they used to drive the herds up towards?
Yes, el Camino de Transhumancia.
Transhumancia. And whether to do a walk along that someday as well. But so it's just great. And I'm organising with Olivia at the moment. With Millie's away skiing in March, and you know we'd like to go, and I think we're going to end up in Soria.
Yeah.
Up there, El Burgo, do Osma?
Yeah.
El Burgo de Osma.
Yeah. There's so many places in Spain, whether it's Galicia, say last year in Asturias. There's the Picos de Europa were just fantastic. We had a holiday up there. The first year we were here. But there's so many places, and I say we're looking forward to that near Soria as well now. So.
I mean, just thinking of the Spanish-English connections here, it's interesting with the Pablo El Mozo de Mendoza, it's kind of the big, most famous horsebacked bullfighter. He actually, his origins of where he ended up doing that was his father used to take English tourists on horseback along the Camino de Santiago.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a mixture of, he kind of would have the bull running in the town in Nevada he was from, so he had that kind of experience running the bull, and then his father was taking these tourists on the trips on the horseback, and Pablo was a kind of, I don't know exactly what age, but kind of, I think as a teenager, used to help him out, so that got his horse riding skills up, and that was where that was the origins of him kind of combining the two skills.
Yeah. I had the great privilege of actually presenting him with a prize one day from the C2R. Unfortunately, my Spanish at the time was even a lot worse than it is now. But I'd love to get into a conversation with him one day to actually find out more. And his son's doing fantastically as well.
Yeah, or just a CTL, which is an unusual institution, shall we say? It's the Club Taurino de Londres, which actually was a whole history of bullfighting clubs all around. I was looking in the 1960s, but almost every town in Britain had there was one in Manchester, and it was kind of I guess it's to do with the boom in tourism in the 60s that sort of people wanted to carry on living out the holiday when back home. There's a history of that to be written.
Yeah.
More questions, comments from anyone?
There is
sorry, I can
in the chat.
Sorry, from Azahara. What do you appreciate the most every time that you visit England after living in different countries?
What do I appreciate most? Yeah, getting back to see the family, rugby. What else? Yeah, sport's great. Sport's great there. Yeah, those couple of things to start with. The food, no, not really, not usually. Certainly in English, some of the quaint English pubs, to be fair, are nice. Yeah.
Well, I suspect Azahara is from Cordoba and lives in Birmingham, so I suspect that she's got more to appreciate when she goes back home. Perhaps so. I shouldn't speak badly of my hometown, but I think it would be easier to be.
Can I ask you when you've been away, when you were on your trips, what do you miss in England, Duncan? Now
I miss. I mean, this is going to sound like a very because when I mainly go to Spain, it's work. Well, I say it's working trips. That makes it sound like it's a lot harder than actually it is. It's generally very enjoyable. But one thing I do find working culture in Spain is very, very different to the UK. I'm not saying better or worse, but just the kind of and. It's weird that when I'm there for 3 or 4 weeks, I'm absolutely fine with that because it's just I'm adapting in a different thing. And then after 5 or 6 weeks, I get frustrated when when just things don't operate in the way that I'm accustomed to. As I say, not saying it's any worse or any different. So that I'm not saying it is different, but I'm not saying it's worse. It's just kind of my expectations. And then it's what I tend to miss is it's more because I don't actually live in when I'm there I'm in different people's places, I'm in hotels. I just miss things, that simple things like just having a wardrobe full of clothes and not having to think about what moving, not having to think about where I'm going to next and practical things. So I mean, for me, the best combination is 3 months in Spain and 9 months in the UK. Yeah, we have. And we've got another question from, I'm sorry, I'm possibly going to pronounce this name incorrectly, but Mirna is asking, can you talk a bit about horses and your relationships with them?
Yeah, obviously, as a jockey, you have to get inside the horse's head as quickly as you possibly can, because some horses or a lot of horses I would have rode the first time I sat on them was literally 5 minutes before the start of the race, and I counted them down to the start. You get a feel of them. You've spoken to a jockey that may have ridden them before, or the trainer will give you orders. The owner will tell you something also. But you have to understand what's going to make this horse click. Well, how are you going to get the best out of it? Some horses you have a whip. Some horses will go for the whip. Some horses, if you use the whip, will stop. Will not go any quicker for it at all. And it's understanding the horse, and a lot of that was just experience. And through my career, I had 11,000 races altogether in those about 14, 15 seasons, and would have ridden probably 6,000 or 7,000 different horses, and that was just on a race course. So you know the things to try and say what clicks. Sometimes it's the breeding as well. That other horses that you've ridden with this sire, father, they'll be bad jumpers, or they'll have some little quirk, that a lot of them that can have. So yeah, you just have to do it as quickly as possible. Get inside their head.
I mean, this is a question coming from a place of ignorance, but it's curiosity. I mean, I wasn't raised knowing much about horse racing, but my granddad used to. I think my granddad probably lost more the same or more as that taxi driver did on the horses over the years. But I mean, the horse that I just remember from listening into the conversation was you were always associated with Desert Orchid, wasn't you? Was the kind of one of
Yeah.
the, kind of probably one, if not the most famous horse in the 80s, I'm guessing, for him to have come onto my radar. And are the kind of horses which one are the most famous that you become most linked with? Are they necessarily the best ones, or is it a whole series of circumstances?
Certainly, we're talking about him. We haven't mentioned him yet, but he was the horse that sort of made my career. Won 2 nationals, West Tipham and Minnehaha. But the best horse I ever rode was Desert Orchid. I was very lucky to get on him. Simon Sherwood rode him to a lot of winners before him. Colin Brown partnered him as a young horse when he was a mad tearaway, and I got him at the end, and he was an amazing horse. I managed to win 2 King Georges on him at Kempton at Christmas, the big race at Christmas. Unfortunately, we got beaten the Gold Cups in Cheltenham, but he also we managed to win an Irish Grand National as well. He was he was certainly the best horse I rode, one of the best horses in steeplechasing that have seen a race course over the last 50 years. You compare with the likes of Arkle, Corto, Star, and he'd be right up there. So yeah, I feel very privileged to have sat in his back.
We got a follow-up question of, did you have any special friendships with any horses, which I guess we've kind of touched on. I mean, I guess I was curious is because a lot of the horseback bullfighters, I mean, I know Pablo Hermoso de Mendoza, for example, has his stables where he keeps actually the retired horses, the ones that he doesn't use anymore.
Yeah.
And did you carry on having a relationship with them after you ride with them, or is that just not practical?
So much. I know some jockeys will, they've retired, they may have the space for it. They'll have a couple of retired horses. I think Richard Johnson has one of his favorite horses will be in the field. I didn't on 1 or 2. I would have seen Desert Orchid. I rode him after he retired a couple of times. The worst thing about that was he was such a strong horse and so eager and so keen all the time. I had to fight my way with him to stop him running away with me. So it was could be quite a battle after it. But you have horses like a horse called Waterloo Boy who put everything into it, and you knew that he put everything into his race. Possibly wasn't the top flight, even though he'd finished 2nd and 3rd in champion chases. But I thought the world of him. Yeah.
And there's one final follow-up question here, which is I don't know if it's final, one currently final question. So you don't I was just asking about, you don't work out with any horses many times before a race. You just go to meet the horse 5 minutes before the races.
So sometimes it'll be like that. Other times you'll school the horse at home. If it was a horse for David Nicholson or Martin Pipe, my trainer, I might sit on a horse maybe a couple of times at home, jump 6 fences, maybe a couple of times, and then you would sit on him on the race course. But a lot of horses, say probably 60-70% of the horses I would have ridden, I wouldn't have ridden at home at all. Yeah.
And do horses enjoy racing?
Yes, I would say the majority of them do. Competitive, and I'd say Desert Orchid was the most competitive horse I rode, and I was in one close finish on him at Sandown, and I swear if I hadn't moved, if I'd just stayed stationary up the run in, I'm sure he would have stuck his head in front. He literally, the other horse came to us halfway up the run in. It was neck and neck, but you could feel him trying, he was not going to let him pass him.
lose that race. And I think, I mean, I'm aware that we're getting to a time, both, I mean, it's the advantage of the time difference we have, that we kind of finish around a time which is suitable for people eating both in the UK and Spain from a 7:30, 8:30. But has anyone got one final question that I'd like to ask before we finish off? Oh, sorry.
Yes,
a
comment.
Yeah, a comment from Pedro.
From Mirna, yeah. Goldstein, yeah. Thank you for such an interesting talk. I thank you both, Duncan and Richard. It has been such an interesting talk about I have envy of your life, traveling around the world, knowing the pole, south, north, walking around, guiding tourists is a really amazing life. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. The facts are that we feel that you love your life in Spain. We're very happy about it. Thank you, Duncan, for this series. And Merry Christmas to everybody. Feliz Navidad. And we will have our next series of Hispanglia in 2025. We will announce that in end of January with new talks about the relations, cultural relations, and the life in the United Kingdom and Spain. Muchísimas gracias y buenas noches a todos.
Muchas gracias a todos y todas.
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad.